Hey everybody, welcome to Jacob's Quest, and tonight I just got back from watching Blink Twice, which is the brand new thriller starring Channing Tatum right after his appearance as Gambit in Deadpool and Wolverine. So this is a very different role, so it's kind of funny how recently these movies released with each other. But yeah, this movie was pretty interesting. There's a lot of stuff I can't say because there are pretty major twists, even when some of them are revealed. 20 minutes later, another major twist comes out, and I'm like, okay, like it's definitely one of those movies where, like, once you know what's going on, you gotta go back and rewatch it again, because you're like, okay, there were clues and hints being dropped early on, some of which I caught, some of which I'm like, hold on, how does that make sense? And then I gotta think about it. I'm like, okay, I think it all does still logically add up, like it all still makes sense, but I definitely need to go like watch this one again whenever it releases on streaming or something, because there's definitely hints as to what is happening. So just pay attention as you're watching this one. It's one of those. And yeah, basically all I really can say before I get into like spoiler stuff is just that this is a really decent thriller. I think, it's not really a horror. It's more of just like really creepy and thriller, and then like I guess it does turn into just a straight up horror movie once, twists start happening and things are revealed, and you're like, oh, this is actually terrifying. And oddly enough, there are parts in the movie where they go into like a dark comedy type thing, where like, because if you've seen the trailer, it is about people going to this island where they're just doing a bunch of partying, and then stuff slowly starts getting weird, and you start maybe trying to figure some stuff out. But while everyone's partying and everyone's getting along, there's a lot of comedy elements happening, and so it's funny in the moment, but then when you go back and once you know what's going on, you remember those moments where things were being funny, and you're like, oh, this is really messed up. This is like all kinds of messed up. Yeah. So all I gotta say really is just that, like, it does deal with some pretty heavy subject matter. It gets heavier than I thought it would. Like, you kind of look at the trailer for this thing and you're like, okay, you might have a couple guesses as to what's going on, and while you're probably not entirely wrong, it does get darker and more serious, and I'm like, some of the stuff that they tackle in here, I'm like, oh, all right. It feels like a second ago we were kind of joking around and everyone's having fun, and now we're getting into like some serious stuff, and I'm like, okay, all right, kind of a tone shift. I mean, obviously, right, major twist happened, huge tone shift, but like, yeah, if you ride with it, this is a pretty decent thriller. And Channing Tatum, I don't think I've seen him as a villain before. I know him from 21 Jump Street, right? And of course, recently Deadpool and Wolverine. But yeah, this is a very different role for him. I've never seen him be this dark. So it was interesting. Yeah, I think if you're looking for a pretty decent thriller, you'll have a good time with this, especially like the mystery as to like what is going on. It's one of those things where like you can guess a decent amount as it goes, but I think there is still a layer that you're like, oh, I didn't realize it went that deep when you get to the end. So that's all I'm going to say there, and then I'm going to go ahead and get into some spoiler territory. So I recommend you go watch the movie, because I'm going to talk about spoiler stuff, and this will change how you see the movie once you know this. So if you're interested at all in watching this, watch this first. Go ahead and turn this off. Avoid, I guess, social media. I don't know how much, I don't know how much of a opening weekend this movie's going to have. I think it's being largely overshadowed by other movies that are out right now, obviously. But yeah, don't try not to get yourself spoiled before you see this. So here we go. I'm gonna go into spoilers now. That was your warning. Spoilers. And this is one of those movies where that really matters. Okay, here we go. Spoiler territory. All right. So the big twist in this movie. All right. So when you watch this thing, you're thinking, okay, these people are going to a billionaire's island where he claims that he's gotten all kinds of therapy, and you right away think, okay, it's gonna end up being like a cult type thing. There's going to be maybe some human sacrifices or something, and they kind of joke about that in the movie, right? And it's not really that. In fact, I'd say, like, whereas that's kind of a Wicker Man-esque, more fantastical, like, oh, it's scary, but it's not like, you know, that's like a Midsommar kind of thing, where, like, how realistic is that's gonna happen? This is darker and somehow more realistic, but in a really sad, messed up kind of way. So what it turns out is happening is that so throughout the entire movie, our characters are partying, and slowly they're losing track of days, they're losing track of events. You know, they're waking up with bruises, and they're waking up with like dirt under their fingernails. At one point, her friend disappears, and then other people don't even remember what her friend, like what friend? You didn't have a friend here. What are you talking about? And so you're like, is there brainwashing happening? What's going on? And you pick up stuff throughout the movie of like, okay, there's this perfume, and there's these flowers, and there's these snakes that are all over the island, and somehow this all has something to do with it, right? Like, you know, something's going on, like something's affecting their memory or brainwashing them or something, and it has something to do with a combination of all those things. So what it is that our main villain here, Channing Tatum, the billionaire, so after he had some, and I don't know if they fully like went into it, there was some, you know, they went through some like newspaper headlines and articles and stuff that flashed on screen really quickly, so maybe one day we'll be able to pause those and read exactly what they say. But he is the billionaire CEO of a company who had some kind of controversy and stepped down, and he has since bought an island and went to therapy, and like that's like, oh, I'm changing, I'm trying to become better, all that, right? And of course he went on this whole public apology tour like every celebrity does whenever they're caught in doing something bad, right? And that's kind of one of the themes that this movie kind of tackles, I guess. But it turns out what he's been doing is that he brings ladies here, and there's this perfume that makes them forget things, you know, like it's they spray on the perfume and they just go on into full party mode, and they're having fun and everyone's smiling, and you know, like, oh, they're on vacation, everything's fine. But as the night goes on, they have dinner and they start like experimenting with drugs, and then they wake up and they don't remember what's going on. And it does indeed turn out that like the men on the island, Channing Tatum and all of his friends, have been assaulting these women and then making them forget about what's going on. And it's only because of incidental taking the venom of these snakes that are on the island that lets them remember what's happening, that lets them snap out of this. And so now, you know, the main lead and these women all have to try to escape what's going on with these men, and that's what it is, you know, like they have to try and get revenge, and they have to like escape the island, and they, you know, they're being chased down by the guys, and then they grab weapons, and it's just becomes into this big thrill horror, you know, slasher kind of thing. And obviously tackling some pretty heavy subject matter, because as each of them remember what's going on, we see each of their reactions to all the stuff that's happened to them, and it gets pretty horrifying. And yeah, and that's basically what it is. I guess Channing Tatum's character, this billionaire who, you know, he's like, he goes on this whole spiel about how like, oh, but if our trauma is forgotten, then we can be free of all the pain and all this. And I'm like, yeah, but you're luring women here to traumatize them, like with assaults, and then you're making them forget, and you're acting as if this is like makes everything okay. It's just like, you know, the most psychotic kind of stuff. And obviously, like I said, dealing with pretty heavy subject matter that there's definitely more qualified people to like analyze this movie on a deeper level. And I do feel like it's going to be one of those, you know, you're going to see some people who know a lot more about this subject, more educated about it, and they're going to be able to deep dive on this movie, because I feel like there's like layers to this thing that I am not qualified to fully dive into, but that's what it is. And then we get another twist, and the other twist is simply that our main lead, the girl, is it turns out she has been here before, because some of the workers around the island were kind of acting weird around her, and they're calling her Red Rabbit or something. And her, she was known to have drawn animals on her fingernails, and that was like her thing. It turns out a year earlier she had been here. Channing Tatum had already like targeted her, and so the entire setup of her meeting him and going to this island with a billionaire and partying, like, they all knew her already, and she had just completely erased it from her memory. And it gets just increasingly messed up. Now the variant here is kind of interesting. So really everyone except for the main girl and this one who was basically on the TV show Survivor, they both survive, and then she ends up deciding to save the life of Channing Tatum. And this is where I do feel like it's gonna bring up some conversation of like, oh, is she kind of doing something that's pretty, like, not on the same level, but like you're pretty close to doing something equally evil here. What she ends up doing is she saves Channing Tatum's life, and remember, he's a billionaire CEO of this company, and we kind of fast forward several months later, they're at this big company event again, and Channing Tatum's psychiatrist, who was like in on the whole island thing, right? He goes up to him and is like, "Hey man, what's going on? We're gonna have another island trip," So of course, showing that he was totally in on it and he's evil too. And Channing Tatum's acting weird. He's like, "What? Sure, I guess." He's acting all like dazed and confused, kind of. And it turns out what's happening is that our main lead has been putting the same memory altering chemical in his vape that he has had the entire movie. He's been smoking from this vape. She put some of it in his vape, and she has seemingly since married him, and now she is the CEO of the company, because when they bring her on stage and she's like, "Oh, hey everybody, I'm Mrs. King," or whatever. So like in like a really kind of crazy twist way, she's completely flipped the script, and now she's drugging him, she's married him, and now she owns his company. And he's just kind of left as this like kind of bumbling, like memory broken guy. So pretty crazy, wild stuff. And I think if anything, that's gonna be like, I think it's definitely a poetic justice kind of thing, where like, you get that catharsis of like, oh, he definitely deserved that, like he did. But also you're kind of wondering, like, if this happened in the real world, you'd be like, but she might also be evil now, because like this is also kind of messed up, so I don't know. He deserved it, absolutely. But damn, that's crazy. So yeah, it just kind of ends on this sort of like, she takes charge of the company, and yeah, I guess what some people out there would probably call like a girl boss kind of moment. But yeah, it's pretty nuts. And like I said, this movie has layers to it. There's going to be people able to break all this down, and people more qualified than me to do so. But yeah, I think this was a fascinating one. What probably could have been just a very generic, like, oh, it's just like a Wicker Man cult type thing. Like, they could have easily just done that. But instead they went like a darker and like more, I don't know, a deeper way with it, like there's more to talk about and there's more to think about, and you're trying to wrap your head around. And then all of the crazy shit that Channing Tatum was talking about, and he just kind of comes off as this whiny billionaire celebrity who's like, oh, I had to apologize, but people on social media didn't forgive me, and now I do this, and it's like this weird power thing that he's got going on. It's sick, but it's like, what the hell? It's like it's horrifying in like a really messed up way, I guess. So yeah, just that is the movie Blink Twice. Like I said, once you know all that stuff, once you know like what the big twist is, and the fact that she had been here before, and then all these guys were in on it the whole time, And then you go back and think about earlier parts of the movie where they're all joking around and partying and having a good time, and you're like, oh my god. Like, so that means every time they go to a nighttime sequence and we just see like flashes of partying and stuff, you're like, oh no, horrible stuff is happening like the moment that this scene ends. Like, oh man. So yeah, that is the movie Blink Twice. Pretty crazy. And I feel like this is definitely going to be one that in some circles is going to cause some pretty interesting conversations, and I look forward to seeing those. So yeah, let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.